So we're now going to look at a slightly more complicated pattern matching technique, and this one involves pattern matching something that is situated inside the garment or on top of the garment. So a really good example is a patch pocket. So patch pockets are normally something that is pattern matched with the fabric underneath. So I'm going to teach you a couple of techniques on how you go about doing that. So in front of me I have a vest or a waistcoat front panel piece that has a patch pocket, and I've got the patch pocket pattern piece here. I've also got a little bit of fabric that has quite a vibrant pattern that I would quite like to match. So we now need to look at the placement of the main pattern piece. In this case, this is the front of the vest, and we've got to just consider again where that's sitting in relation to the fabric to economize on it. So I have placed it here. Now I actually think that's quite a nice cluster of flowers, although having said that, I think all over is a nice cluster of flowers. So once you've positioned where you want your garment to go, and you also may need to consider any pattern matching you're doing in the sides or along the front, so all of that needs to be taken into consideration. Once you've got it placed, you can then pin it. So I'm just going to do that now. Right, so that's now pinned into position. So I'm actually quite lucky because I'm working with a very vibrant piece of fabric, and I'm working with a tracing paper pattern, which means that I can really clearly see the fabric pattern through the tracing paper. But if you're working with a slightly darker fabric or heavier pattern paper, so if you've printed it on standard printer paper, for example, it might be more tricky to see. So a really good tip is to pin your pattern onto the fabric and then take that fabric and tape it to a window, so you can see the natural light coming through. Obviously you have to do it in daytime, but you can see all that natural light coming through the back of the fabric and onto the paper pattern. So that's one good thing you can do to get a clearer picture. The other thing you can do is to create a light box, and you can do this very easily at home. If you've got a Pyrex or a Tupperware box or a sandwich box that's clear, and obviously not full of food. So if you take your torch light on your phone or a torch, and then you place that Pyrex or Tupperware over the top of it, and then you place the piece of fabric and the pattern where you want to pattern match it, you should be able to get a really clear image of the fabric pattern that you want to trace. So that's really good, and that's how I'm going to be working today. Right, so before I go too much further with the pattern matching, what I'm going to do is look at the pocket piece that I'm matching onto the garment. So you will notice, if this is where it needs to be placed, you will notice that the pocket is significantly bigger, and that's because it's got its seam allowances included. So we need to identify where the seam allowances are going to be. So I've had a look at my pattern instructions, and it is telling me that I've got a 5/8 seam allowance to work with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ignore this line because this is the facing of the patch pocket, and then I'm going to draw in a 5/8 seam allowance on these 3 lines. Right, so I have now finished that, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold the seam allowances out of the way. Yeah, I'm going to fold them to the wrong side. Just so that I've got a really good understanding of exactly what's going to be visible on the outside of the garment. Okay, I'm going to do the facing as well. So we should have a little box here in which to place on the garment. Excellent. So that fits nicely in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin that now onto the, or over the original pattern for the front piece. And I'm just going to secure it all into position as if it was a piece of fabric to be sewn. So this has now been pinned into position, and actually you can see that where there is overlap of pattern paper, so it's folded under and it's sitting on top of the main garment one, the pattern is becoming a little bit harder to see through all of it. So the light box is really going to help me with this. Now what we're going to do to assist with the pattern matching itself is to trace the key elements of the fabric pattern onto the pocket patch pocket pattern itself. And whilst obviously it's important to kind of pick up some of the key elements in the middle, it's most important to make sure that the edges are clearly defined, because that's where you're predominantly going to be matching up the fabric. So, and it's going to be really obvious if it doesn't match actually. So I'm going to start, if I move this over, I'm going to start with these flowers on this side. So I'm going to just trace. Now, one thing that is quite important to note is that I haven't traced this pocket onto tracing paper, and I think ordinarily if I was doing it on a garment, for a real garment I was making, I probably would, to preserve the pattern, but I'm not too worried about this pattern, so I'm just going to use this as a demonstration. Okay, now you can do some shade if you want, so that there is a black part of the of this particular flower. And also what I'm going to do is I'm going to note down the colour of the flower. So you'll notice that on this fabric you've got greens and purples and pinks, and if I don't write the colour into the traced flower, then I will not know which one is which. So I'm going to put a blue against that, and I'm going to carry on tracing this. And I'll go all the way around, making sure that all these elements are traced accurately. So that's an orange flower. So I have now drawn all those flowers. It took a little while. So again, pattern matching isn't for the faint-hearted. It does take some time to get this absolutely right. Now I used just a pencil to do it, but if you were working with something that's particularly vibrant and you wanted to make sure you got all the colours correct, you could use different colour pencils or pens to trace these patterns. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to remove the pocket pattern piece, and I'm going to have a little look where I might be able to place this. Right, so that's a yellow flower, that's a red one, that's a yellow one. So I actually think that this is sitting here. Yes, it is. Perfect. That's sitting beautifully there. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to pin this in the middle to stop it from moving, because I need to unpin those seam allowances. I don't want it to shift too much, because I want everything to be aligned nice and beautifully around those edges. There we go. Yeah, that's perfect. So I'm just going to do that. Okay, and then we can lift those seam allowances out of the equation And we now know exactly where we need to cut our fabric to get a perfectly matched pattern. Right, so that's all been cut out and I've unpinned the patch pocket pattern. I'm now going to prepare the pocket for insertion. Now, ordinarily I would sew this correctly, but for the sake of this little demonstration, I'm just going to do it quickly just so that you can see the impact of the pattern matching. What is really important though is that you make absolutely sure that you're folding at the right points. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, with a fabric marker, I'm going to place where the facing needs to be folded, and then I'm going to make sure that those seam allowances are also folded at the right position. So I'm now going to press this so that it is sitting where it should do. And as I said, I would probably spend some time mitering these corners and finishing off the facing properly, but I'm not going to do that today. Right, so that's been pressed. It's a little bit rough, as I said, but there is a video on how to miter corners and how to sew really neat patch pockets. I'll link it down in the comment section. But there we go. That's looking good. So what I've done is I have again deliberately, for the sake of the video, drawn in where the placement of this patch pocket is going to go on the main garment piece. I would probably tailor tack this if I was doing it, but it's quite hard to see tailor tacks with a very vibrant fabric, so I've decided just to draw a little box in for you. Now, moment of truth, we're going to place this into that box, and hopefully you will be able to see it blend seamlessly in with this fabric here. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time just tweaking it, and then I'm going to pin it and I'm going to sew it, and then I'll show you the final result. I'm just going to press away any of those friction marks that I've left on the fabric, and this is the finished result. So I think that's really well pattern matched. So that's how you do it. It's a little bit fiddly, but it's worth every ounce of effort to get such a lovely finish.